A disturbing encounter. It was a typical Tuesday afternoon when 16-year-old Marcus boarded the city bus, ready for another long commute to his after-school job. He slipped into his seat, headphones in place, drowning out the noise of the bustling city around him. His mind wandered, shifting between thoughts of homework, basketball practice, and the bills he needed to help his mother with. The bus was crowded, a kaleidoscope of faces and stories, and amidst the chaos, he found solace in his music. As the bus jolted forward, Marcus glanced around. His attention was drawn to a young girl sitting several rows ahead of him. She looked about 8, with dark curls framing her face and large, expressive eyes that seemed to absorb everything around her. She sat next to a man who, at first glance, appeared to be her father. He was dressed in a bright orange hoodie and jeans that looked a size too big, a stark contrast to the well-dressed professionals surrounding them. The man had an air of restlessness about him, fidgeting with his hands and frequently glancing at the other passengers. Marcus shifted in his seat, intrigued. The girl, on the other hand, was eerily quiet. While the man exuded a frenetic energy, she sat hunched over, staring at the floor as if it held the answers to her unspoken questions. Something about her demeanor tugged at Marcus's heartstrings. It was as if she was trapped in a world where laughter and joy were distant echoes. Suddenly, the atmosphere changed. The girl looked up, and for a fleeting moment, her eyes locked onto Marcus. In that instant, he felt a pang of urgency emanate from her gaze, a silent plea for help. It was profound and unsettling, and before he could fully process it, the girl made a sudden, deliberate gesture. She reached up, her small fingers curling around her throat. The signal was unmistakable. It conveyed fear, discomfort, and perhaps even desperation. Marcus's heart raced. He instinctively removed his headphones, the music fading into the background as he focused entirely on the girl. The man's attention seemed elsewhere, his eyes darting around, oblivious to the distress signals being sent by his daughter. The disconnect between their appearances and the palpable tension in the air struck Marcus as alarming. As the bus neared Marcus's stop, he grappled with his instinct to intervene. Should he call for help? What could he possibly do? The last thing he wanted was to make a scene or, worse, escalate an already tense situation. But the girl's eyes haunted him, demanding action. With the bus coming to a stop, Marcus made a split-second decision. He quickly pressed the button to alert the driver, forcing himself to stand up and step towards the exit. His gaze remained locked on the girl, who continued to look at him, her expression a mix of fear and longing. Just as he turned to leave, he heard the sound of the girl's voice, a quiet but firm whisper, "Help me." The words cut through the noise of the bus like a knife. They echoed in his mind as he stepped off, feeling a mix of confusion and dread. He glanced back one last time to see the girl looking away, her head bowed again, as the man resumed his erratic behavior. Once outside, Marcus's mind raced. He hurried to his job, but the image of the girl clung to him like a shadow. What had he just witnessed? He couldn't shake the feeling that he had stumbled upon something serious, something that needed to be addressed. But what could he do? Should he call the police? Would they take him seriously? As he approached the restaurant, his stomach knotted with anxiety. He pushed the door open, still reeling from the encounter. Inside the restaurant, the smell of frying food and fresh bread was a welcome distraction, but it did little to alleviate the heaviness in his heart. He clocked in, washed his hands, and took a deep breath. Yet, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shake the image of the little girl from his mind. Her haunting eyes and the silent plea for help had struck a chord deep within him. Time ticked away as he worked, serving customers and clearing tables, but his thoughts continually drifted back to the bus. The girl was alone in the world of that man. Her father, or so he assumed, but was she really safe? Was she being hurt? Each question gnawed at him, and the more he thought about it, the more urgent his feelings became. 30 minutes into his shift, the door swung open, and to Marcus's shock, The same man and girl walked in. His heart raced as recognition washed over him. The man, now dressed in designer clothes that seemed far too extravagant for a mere bus ride, was accompanied by the girl, who looked almost unrecognizable in her new attire. She wore a pink dress with frills, and her hair had been neatly arranged, contrasting sharply with the downtrodden appearance he had seen earlier. "Can I take your order?" Marcus stammered, approaching their table with a mixture of relief and apprehension. The girl didn't meet his gaze. She sat quietly, her posture still somewhat withdrawn, as the man began to order lavish dishes with a carefree air. "Two of everything on the menu," he exclaimed, his voice booming with false bravado. Marcus blinked, trying to reconcile the disparity between their earlier bus ride and this lavish display. The girl seemed to shrink further into her seat, her eyes downcast. As the man continued to chatter excitedly, Marcus's concern deepened. Why had they come to such a high-end restaurant? How had they transformed from downtrodden bus riders to affluent diners in the blink of an eye? Something was clearly wrong, and the juxtaposition of their previous demeanor with their current lavishness sent alarm bells ringing in Marcus's head. He glanced around the restaurant, catching snippets of conversations and laughter from other patrons, but all he could focus on was the girl. Her silence spoke volumes, and he felt an overwhelming urge to protect her, to find out what was happening beneath the surface. "Can I get you anything else?" he asked, forcing a smile as he tried to mask his concern. The man waved his hand dismissively. "Just bring us our food," he said, his tone casual, yet there was an underlying tension in his voice. Marcus nodded, stepping away from the table, but unable to tear his eyes away from them. He retreated to the kitchen, where the hustle and bustle offered some distraction, but even the loud clanging of pots and pans couldn't drown out the worries circling in his mind. He needed to know more about that girl, about what had happened before, and what was happening now. As he prepped the meals, he tried to devise a plan. Should he speak to a manager? Could he call the authorities? The idea of involving the police played heavily on his conscience, but the urgency he felt for the girl overshadowed his hesitations. He resolved to keep a close eye on them and find an opportunity to intervene, to uncover the truth behind that distressing signal and the overwhelming sense of dread that had settled over him. Part of him hoped that maybe, just maybe, he had misinterpreted the situation. But deep down, he knew that what he had witnessed on the bus was far too real to ignore. As the dishes were served, Marcus's heart raced. He had to act before it was too late. The hidden truth, the rhythmic clanging of dishes, and the soft hum of the restaurant enveloped Marcus as he emerged from the kitchen, each step toward the dining area heavy with purpose. He spotted the man and the little girl at their table, engrossed in their extravagant meal, yet the air around them felt charged with an unsettling energy that Marcus couldn't shake. He could still see the girl's face from that day on the bus, the expression of fear and desperation etched into his memory. As he walked past their table, he caught a glimpse of the little girl's hands, which trembled slightly as she fidgeted with the hem of her dress. Despite the luxury surrounding her, there was an unmistakable heaviness in her demeanor that spoke of a life burdened by something unspoken. The man, on the other hand, seemed oblivious to her state, laughing boisterously and engaging with the other patrons, his demeanor contrasting sharply with the little girl's silence. Marcus felt a surge of frustration. How could someone be so blind to the distress of their own child? It was a question that fueled his determination to get to the bottom of this unsettling situation. After finishing his shift, he had to find a way to help her, even if it meant taking risks. After the restaurant closed, Marcus gathered his belongings and stepped outside into the cool evening air, the city lights illuminating his path. The bus stop was just a few blocks away, but tonight, he felt a sense of urgency that propelled him forward. His mind raced with possibilities as he walked, trying to piece together a plan. Should he follow them, call the police, or find a way to talk to the girl without alarming her father? He arrived at the bus stop, the dim light casting long shadows. As he waited for the next bus, His thoughts drifted back to the little girl. Her name was still unknown to him, but the image of her sad eyes haunted him, urging him to act. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was meant to do something more, that he had stumbled upon a moment in time where his actions could change the course of someone's life. Suddenly, a bus pulled up, breaking his reverie. He boarded, glancing around to see if the man and the girl were on this route as well. The bus filled quickly, and the chatter of fellow passengers faded into the background as he searched for a sign of them. But there was no sign. A mix of relief and disappointment washed over him. He had hoped to find them, to know more about their story, yet a part of him was grateful they weren't on this bus, fearing what might happen next. As he settled into a seat, his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a message from his mother, asking how work had gone. He typed back a quick reply, but his mind was elsewhere. The glow of the city blurred past him as he stared out the window, lost in thought. The more he pondered, the more he felt that the girl's signal had been a beacon, a call for help that he couldn't ignore. A few stops later, he disembarked, his feet carrying him instinctively toward his neighborhood. He thought about the girl's situation, how helpless she must feel, and how he could be her lifeline. He had to find a way to learn her story, to uncover the truth behind the facade that her father presented to the world. That night, sleep eluded him. He tossed and turned, images of the girl flickering behind his eyelids. What was her life like? Did she feel safe? Why had she been on that bus, dressed in clothing that hinted at a darker reality? As the hours ticked by, he felt a growing sense of urgency. He knew he couldn't let this go. The following day, Marcus made a plan. After school, he would visit the restaurant again, under the guise of needing extra hours. If he could catch another glimpse of the girl, perhaps he could find the right moment to reach out to her. He hoped that if she saw a familiar face, she might feel safe enough to talk. With determination fueling him, Marcus walked into school, the bustling hallways filled with laughter and chatter. Yet in his heart, he felt the weight of a mission. During lunch, he confided in his closest friend, Tanya, about what he had witnessed. It felt like she was begging for help, he said, his voice low. I can't just ignore it. Tanya listened, her brow furrowed in concern. You should tell someone. Maybe the school counselor. Or your parents. Marcus shook his head. What if I'm wrong? What if she's fine? I just need to know more first. I have to be sure. After classes ended, he hurried home, trying to gather his thoughts. He imagined different scenarios, replaying the bus ride in his mind, trying to identify any clues he might have missed. Once home, he did his homework quickly, but his focus was scattered. His mind was a swirl of possibilities and fears. Later that afternoon, he donned his work uniform and headed to the restaurant, adrenaline coursing through his veins. As he stepped through the familiar doors, the comforting scent of garlic and fresh bread greeted him. Yet his heart raced with anticipation. The restaurant was bustling, filled with the usual crowd. After clocking in, Marcus began his shift, serving customers and clearing tables, all the while keeping a watchful eye on the door. He needed to know if the girl and her father would return. Minutes turned into hours, and just as he started to lose hope, he saw them walk through the door. The man was dressed in yet another flamboyant outfit, this time a bright green shirt that seemed to clash even more with the rest of the clientele. The girl, however, looked more withdrawn than ever, her new dress hanging off her small frame as if she were trying to hide within it. Marcus's heart sank at the sight of her despondence. He maneuvered through the restaurant, trying to appear nonchalant, but every instinct urged him closer. When their eyes met, he felt that same connection as before, a spark of recognition mingled with fear. "Can I take your order?" he asked, forcing a smile as he approached their table. The man glanced up, clearly in a good mood, but the girl barely acknowledged him, her eyes cast downward. "Two of the special, please," the man said, grinning as he looked around at the restaurant's decor, oblivious to the little girl's struggle. "Coming right up," Marcus replied, his heart racing. As he walked away, He couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. He had to find a way to reach the girl before it was too late. After placing their order, Marcus decided to take a risk. He returned to their table, leaning in slightly. "Excuse me," he said, speaking directly to the girl. "Hi there. What's your name?" The girl looked up, startled. It's Zara," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Zara, that's a beautiful name," Marcus replied, his heart swelling with empathy. "Are you enjoying your meal?" Zara nodded, but her eyes flickered with uncertainty. The man seemed preoccupied, scrolling through his phone, blissfully unaware of the subtle exchange taking place at his table. "Do you want to tell me about your day?" Marcus asked gently, hoping to coax her into opening up. The moment felt fragile, as if they were standing on the edge of something significant. Zara hesitated, glancing at her father. "It's okay," Marcus reassured her. "You can talk to me. I promise I won't tell anyone." Her expression shifted slightly, a flicker of trust breaking through her fear. I want to go home," she finally admitted, her voice quivering. Marcus felt a jolt of concern. "What do you mean? Are you not at home?" Before she could respond, the man looked up, his demeanor shifting as he sensed the tension. "Everything's fine here," he said, casting a warning glance at Zara. "We're just enjoying our dinner." Marcus's heart raced. He sensed the protective instinct rising within him, knowing he had to tread carefully. "Of course," he replied, backing off slightly. "I just wanted to make sure she's happy." As he returned to the kitchen, his mind spun with questions. What was going on in Zora's life? Why did she want to go home? He needed to find a way to help her, to give her an escape from whatever reality she was trapped in. That evening, as the restaurant wound down, Marcus decided he would talk to his manager about his concerns. He approached Mr. Anderson, a stern but fair man who had always looked out for his staff. "Mr. Anderson," Marcus began, his voice steady but laced with urgency, "I need to talk to you about something important. It's about a girl I've seen coming in with her father. I think something might be wrong." Mr. Anderson raised an eyebrow, intrigued but cautious. "What do you mean?" Marcus hesitated, weighing his words carefully. "I saw them on the bus the other day. The girl, she seemed scared. Today, she said she wants to go home. I think she might be in trouble." The manager's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "Did you tell anyone else? We need to make sure she's safe." "No," Marcus admitted. "I wanted to talk to you first. I think I need to find a way to reach her, to get her to open up about what's happening." Mr. Anderson nodded, contemplating Marcus's words. "I understand your concern, but we need to approach this delicately. You could put yourself at risk if things are as you suspect." "I know," Marcus replied, determination firm in his voice. "But I can't just sit back and do nothing." The manager sighed, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "All right, let's keep an eye on the situation. If you see anything else concerning, let me know immediately. We can think of a plan together." Marcus felt a surge of relief. It wasn't much, but it was a start. He had someone on his side, someone who understood the urgency of the situation. As he left the office, his mind was still racing. He felt that time was slipping through his fingers. Zara needed help, and he was determined to be the one to give it to her. That night, as he lay in bed, the gravity of the situation settled heavily on his heart. He had seen too much to turn back now. Whatever it took, he would find a way to help Zara escape her silent prison. Tomorrow would be another chance to make a difference, and he wouldn't waste it. A growing connection. The next day dawned bright and crisp, but Marcus felt an undercurrent of tension as he walked to school. He could barely concentrate in class. His mind drifted back to Zara's haunting eyes and her plea to go home. He was consumed by thoughts of what could be happening to her behind closed doors. The unease in his heart turned into a resolve to take action, not just for Zara, but for himself as well. He knew he had to push beyond his comfort zone if he wanted to make a real difference. As the school day dragged on, The bell finally rang, signaling the end of classes. Marcus rushed through the hallways, his heart racing as he made his way to the restaurant. Each step felt heavy with purpose, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. Today, he would find a way to connect with Zara, to earn her trust so he could learn more about what was going on in her life. When he arrived at the restaurant, the familiar scent of sizzling food filled the air, grounding him momentarily. After clocking in, he started his shift, but his mind remained focused on Zara. He busied himself with tasks, constantly glancing toward the entrance, hoping to see her again. Hours passed, and just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow through the restaurant windows, the door swung open. Marcus's heart leaped as he spotted the man and Zara walking in. Today, the man wore a navy blue suit, polished and sharp, which made him appear more intimidating than before. Zara, however, looked as if she had lost some of the confidence she had gained from wearing the pink dress. Her eyes were downcast, and her small hands twisted nervously in her lap as they walked to their usual table. With a deep breath, Marcus approached them, determined to establish a connection. "Good evening. Can I take your order?" he asked, forcing a cheerful tone into his voice. The man looked up, a wide grin on his face. "Yes, we'll have the usual," he declared, seemingly oblivious to the underlying tension. Zara sat quietly, her eyes darting around the restaurant, as if searching for an escape. Marcus seized the opportunity. "Zara, right? How was your day?" he asked, hoping to draw her into conversation. Zara hesitated, glancing at her father, who was busy scrolling through his phone. "It was okay," she replied softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's good to hear. I hope you got to do something fun," Marcus encouraged, trying to keep his tone light while subtly urging her to open up. Zara shrugged, her fingers continuing to twist nervously. "I just went to school." "I get that. Sometimes school can feel really long, can't it?" Marcus said, his heart aching for her. "But I bet you're doing great in your classes." "Sometimes," she muttered, looking down at her lap. At that moment, the man glanced up from his phone, his demeanor shifting. "What's this? Are you bothering my daughter?" he snapped, the warmth in his voice evaporating. Marcus quickly straightened up, trying to appear unfazed. "No, sir. I was just making conversation," he replied, forcing a smile. "You both have a lovely table here. I'll get your order right away." He turned to leave, feeling a mix of frustration and helplessness. The atmosphere at the table felt heavy with unspoken words, and Marcus could sense the conflict within Zara. He refused to let that be the end of their interaction. As he retreated to the kitchen, he felt a surge of determination. He couldn't let fear dictate his actions. He had to find a way to break through to Zara. He needed to establish trust, to let her know that there was someone out there who cared. Once the orders were placed, he used the time to devise a plan. He decided that he would approach her again, but this time with more intention. He needed to create a space where she felt safe enough to share her story, no matter how painful it might be. After serving their meals, Marcus deliberately dropped by their table again, casually placing a dessert menu in front of them. "The chocolate lava cake is amazing. You should try it," he said, smiling genuinely at Zara. Zara looked up, her eyes meeting his briefly. There was something in her gaze, a flicker of hope or perhaps recognition. "Maybe," she said, her voice still small but slightly more engaged. As the evening wore on, Marcus found himself watching Zara intently whenever he passed by. He noticed the way she flinched at loud noises and how her father often shouted at her, sometimes over trivial matters, making her shrink into her seat. It pained him to see her so clearly uncomfortable, and he resolved to act. Once the restaurant slowed down and the dinner rush began to fade, Marcus approached Mr. Anderson again. "I need to talk to you about Zara. I think something is wrong," he said, urgency threading through his voice. Mr. Anderson looked concerned but maintained a professional demeanor. "What's the situation?" Marcus took a deep breath, recounting what he had witnessed on the bus, how Zara appeared on the surface, and how her father's demeanor seemed aggressive. "I think she's in a situation that's not safe for her," he confessed. "I want to help her, but I need your support." The manager nodded, contemplating Marcus's words. "We'll keep an eye on them. If we notice any more concerning behavior, we'll have to take action. But be careful, Marcus. We can't make assumptions without proof." Marcus felt a mix of relief and frustration. He understood the need for caution, but how could he wait for something worse to happen before stepping in? He was determined to be the advocate Zara needed, to find a way to protect her. After finishing his shift, Marcus made his way home, but instead of going straight inside, he took a detour through the park. The crisp night air invigorated him as he walked, but his thoughts remained heavy with concern for Zara. As he strolled, he noticed a small playground illuminated by the soft glow of nearby lights. It was filled with children laughing and playing, and for a brief moment, he felt a pang of nostalgia for his own childhood, a time when life was uncomplicated and carefree. He took a seat on a nearby bench, staring at the swings swaying gently in the wind. Memories flooded his mind, playing with friends, laughing under the sun, and feeling invincible. But Zara's reality was vastly different, and that thought struck him like a bolt of lightning. He needed to find a way to connect with her outside the restaurant, to ensure her safety. The next day at school, he devised a new plan. After classes, he would hang out in the area where Zara and her father caught the bus, hoping to create an opportunity to speak with her away from the suffocating presence of her father. If he could find a way to communicate with her outside of that environment, maybe he could learn more about her situation. With each passing day, Marcus became more and more committed to this cause. He felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced before, a calling that stretched beyond his personal concerns. It was about standing up for someone who couldn't stand up for herself, about being a voice for the voiceless. The next afternoon, after a day filled with restless anticipation, he took a deep breath as he stepped out of the school building. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over everything. He felt a mix of excitement and anxiety as he made his way toward the bus stop. As he arrived, he found a few familiar faces waiting for the bus, but no sign of Zara. Time ticked by slowly, each minute stretching like an eternity. Just when he was about to lose hope, he spotted her in the distance, walking with her father. They approached the bus stop, and Marcus's heart raced at the sight of her. He took a moment to compose himself, reminding himself of his purpose. As they got closer, he felt a mix of nerves and determination surge within him. The bus arrived, and as they climbed on, Marcus quickly followed behind, taking a seat a few rows back, allowing himself to observe. The man was engrossed in conversation with another passenger, his voice loud and boisterous, but Zara sat quietly, her eyes scanning the bus. The moment felt fragile, as if the world was holding its breath. Marcus's pulse quickened. This was his chance. Gathering his courage, he leaned forward slightly, catching Zora's eye. "Hey, Zora," he said softly, trying to sound casual despite the urgency bubbling beneath the surface. Zora looked startled, but then she relaxed slightly as recognition washed over her face. "Hi," she whispered back, glancing around to ensure her father was occupied. "Is everything okay?" he asked, his voice low but filled with concern. She hesitated, her eyes darting toward her father. "I'm fine," she replied, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. Marcus nodded, understanding the need for caution. "If you ever need anything, you can talk to me, okay?" Zora's gaze softened, and for a fleeting moment, he saw a spark of hope in her eyes. "Thank you," she murmured, the sincerity in her voice igniting a fire of determination within him. As the bus continued on its route, Marcus remained vigilant, taking note of Zora's body language and the subtle signals she gave off. He felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders, but in that moment, he also felt a glimmer of possibility. Together, they could navigate this journey towards safety and freedom. With each interaction, He began to understand that change was not only possible but within reach. His resolve strengthened as he vowed to protect Zara and help her find her voice, no matter the obstacles that lay ahead. Little did he know, this journey was just beginning, and the challenges they would face would test their courage and resilience in ways they had never imagined. A dangerous revelation. The following days unfolded in a blur for Marcus. Each moment spent at school felt like a countdown to his next interaction with Zora. Their brief exchanges on the bus became a lifeline, a flicker of hope that kept him going through the monotony of his daily routine. He found himself looking forward to seeing her, to learning more about her life, and what lay beneath her guarded exterior. After school, Marcus spent time at the bus stop, anxiously awaiting Zora's arrival, hoping for a chance to connect with her without her father hovering nearby. Every afternoon felt charged with potential, but the fear of the unknown loomed over him like a storm cloud. On one particularly chilly day, as Marcus stood waiting, his heart raced when he spotted Zora walking towards the bus stop, her father not far behind. She looked more withdrawn than usual, her shoulders slumped, and her gaze cast downward. Marcus felt a surge of protective instinct. This was not just a matter of curiosity anymore, it was about ensuring her safety. As they reached the bus stop, Marcus approached cautiously. "Hey, Zora," he greeted, trying to keep his tone casual despite the tension in the air. Zora's eyes flickered up to meet his, a mix of relief and anxiety washing over her face. "Hi," she replied softly, her voice barely audible. "Are you okay? You seem a little down," he said, leaning in slightly, trying to draw her out. Before she could respond, her father approached, his demeanor shifting as he noticed Marcus. "What are you doing talking to my daughter?" he barked, a flash of anger igniting in his eyes. Marcus straightened, forcing himself to maintain eye contact. "I was just checking in on her. I thought she looked a little upset," he replied, attempting to keep his tone respectful. "Zara's fine," her father snapped, wrapping a protective arm around her shoulders, pulling her closer. The sudden movement made Zora flinch, and Marcus's heart sank at the sight. "Let's not disturb her," the man continued, his voice dripping with possessiveness. "We're waiting for the bus." Realizing the conversation was over, Marcus took a step back, feeling a sense of helplessness wash over him. The bus pulled up just in time, and as Zara climbed aboard, she glanced back at Marcus, a silent plea in her eyes. As the bus drove away, Marcus's frustration boiled over. He felt powerless and trapped, knowing that Zora was stuck in a situation he couldn't fully understand. But he couldn't give up on her. Something in his gut told him that if he could just get her alone for a moment, she might open up about her life. Determined to make a difference, Marcus came up with a plan. He would start gathering information about Zora's father. If there was something hidden behind his protective demeanor, perhaps it would provide the key to understanding the girl's plight. The next day, instead of waiting at the bus stop, Marcus decided to hang around the neighborhood near Zora's school, hoping to catch sight of her during the lunch hour. After a few hours of waiting, he spotted her walking out with a small group of friends. His heart lifted momentarily. But as he observed, he noticed the way she lagged behind, almost as if she were hesitant to fully engage with them. Gathering his courage, Marcus approached Zora as she stood apart from her friends. "Hey, Zora," he called, trying to keep his tone upbeat. She turned, her eyes widening slightly. "Hi," she replied, glancing over her shoulder at her friends who were now walking away. "Do you mind if I walk with you?" Marcus asked, sensing this might be his opportunity. Okay," Zora said, a hint of uncertainty in her voice. As they walked, Marcus carefully navigated the conversation. "How's school going?" he asked, keeping it light. "It's fine," Zara said, but her tone lacked enthusiasm. Marcus could sense the heaviness that surrounded her. "Is there something you'd like to talk about?" he probed gently, hoping to encourage her to open up. Zara hesitated, biting her lip as if weighing her words. "It's just, my dad can be strict sometimes," she finally admitted, her voice trembling slightly. Marcus's heart sank. What do you mean by strict? She glanced around nervously before whispering, He gets angry if I don't do what he says. Sometimes he yells. A knot formed in Marcus's stomach. Does he ever hurt you? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zara shook her head quickly. No, not like that. He doesn't let me talk to people. He says it's for my own good. Her eyes filled with tears, and she quickly wiped them away. That doesn't sound fair, Marcus said, feeling a rush of empathy. You should be able to have friends and be happy. I know, she replied, her voice wavering. But if I tell him I want to hang out with someone, he gets really mad. Have you tried talking to someone about it? Marcus asked, his mind racing with ideas. Maybe a teacher or a counselor. Zara shook her head again, looking down. I don't want to get in trouble. I just want things to be normal. The word normal hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. What did that even mean for Zara? It was clear that her father's control was suffocating her spirit, and the fear of retribution kept her from seeking help. Zara, if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here. You can trust me, Marcus said, feeling the urgency of the moment. I know it's hard, but you don't have to go through this alone. She met his gaze, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of hope behind her fear. Thank you, Marcus, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Just then, a familiar figure emerged from the school building. The same man who had been so protective, so suffocating. Zara's father. Marcus's heart raced as he quickly assessed the situation. He needed to distance himself before the man could question why he was talking to his daughter. I should go, Zara said, glancing nervously at her father. Yeah, be careful, Marcus replied, feeling a pang of helplessness as she turned to leave. Remember, I'm here if you need anything. As Zara hurried away, Marcus watched her father approach, his demeanor radiating disapproval. The tension in the air was palpable, and Marcus felt a surge of anger toward the man who was so clearly stifling his daughter's spirit. Who were you talking to? The man barked, his eyes narrowing as he approached Marcus. Just chatting with Zora, Marcus replied, trying to maintain his composure. She seemed a bit down. The man stepped closer, a menacing edge to his voice. Stay away from her. She doesn't need friends. I take care of her just fine. Marcus's heart pounded in his chest. I'm just trying to be friendly, he said, forcing himself to remain calm. Don't make me repeat myself, the man warned, his tone cold and unyielding. Zara doesn't need anyone meddling in her life. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Marcus shaken. The encounter made it clear that the father was not just protective. He was controlling, and the implications were frightening. Marcus's resolve hardened. He had to find a way to help Zara, to protect her from the clutches of her father's suffocating grip. As he walked home that evening, he couldn't shake the image of Zara's fearful eyes from his mind. She was trapped in a cycle of control and isolation, and if he didn't act, her situation would only worsen. It was time to escalate his efforts. That night, he stayed up late researching local resources for children in distress, looking for organizations or hotlines that could help children facing abuse or neglect. He took notes, gathering information that he could share with Zara when the time was right. The next day, he arrived at the restaurant early, his heart racing with anticipation. He wanted to create an opportunity to talk to Zara again, to share what he had learned and offer her a way out. As he clocked in and started his shift, he kept a close watch on the entrance. Hours passed, and the evening crowd began to swell. Just when Marcus started to lose hope, the door swung open, and in walked Zara and her father. The man looked particularly agitated today, his brow furrowed as he scanned the room. As they settled into their usual table, Marcus felt a mix of determination and dread. He approached them, trying to keep his demeanor neutral. Good evening. What can I get for you tonight? He asked, forcing a smile. The man ordered without hesitation, and as he did, Marcus glanced at Zara. She looked weary, her eyes darting around as if searching for a way out. "Zara," he said, lowering his voice, "can I get you something special today? A dessert, maybe?" Her eyes lit up for a brief moment, and she nodded. "Can I have chocolate cake?" "Absolutely. I'll make sure it's the best piece in the house," Marcus replied, his heart racing with the thrill of being able to make her smile. As he turned to head back to the kitchen, he felt a rush of adrenaline. He would use this moment to pass her the information he had gathered. As he prepared the dessert, he jotted down the hotline number and a few encouraging words on a napkin. When he returned to their table, he placed the cake in front of Zara with a flourish. "Here you go, the best chocolate cake we have," he exclaimed, trying to divert the father's attention. The man seemed pleased and took a large slice for himself. As they dug into the dessert, Marcus seized the moment. He leaned down, discreetly sliding the napkin toward Zara. "If you ever need help, just look for this," he whispered. Zara's eyes widened in surprise, and she quickly glanced at her father. With a slight nod, she tucked the napkin into her pocket, her expression unreadable. "Is everything all right over there?" her father barked, catching Marcus off guard. "Yes, sir. Just checking in on Zara," he replied, forcing a smile and stepping back. The tension crackled in the air, but Zara's momentary smile gave him hope. As the evening unfolded, Marcus felt a sense of urgency. He knew he had to act before the situation escalated further. After his shift, he reached out to a local child advocacy group, sharing what he had witnessed. They listened intently, offering him guidance on how to proceed. They advised him to keep documenting any concerning behavior he observed, to be prepared to act if the situation worsened. With their support, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. He could help Zara find a way out of her troubled home life, but he also had to be careful. Every interaction had to be planned meticulously, and he needed to create a safe environment for Zara to express her fears without the risk of her father retaliating. Days turned into weeks, and each bus ride brought new challenges. Zara continued to appear distant, yet Marcus noticed small signs of resilience emerging. Their conversations, albeit brief, became a lifeline for her, a means of escape from the oppressive atmosphere she endured at home. The more he learned about her, the more Marcus felt a deep-seated responsibility to protect her. And as their bond strengthened, he began to realize that while he had set out to save Zara, she was unknowingly saving him, too, showing him the power of courage and the importance of standing up for what was right. But the shadows of uncertainty loomed ever closer. The more he delved into Zara's situation, the more he understood that change wouldn't come easy. The looming threat of her father's control was still very real, and every day brought new risks. Determined to shield her from harm, Marcus vowed to stand by Zara's side, no matter the cost. Together, they would face the challenges ahead, armed with the knowledge that they were not alone in their fight. Each step brought them closer to uncovering the truth, and each moment spent together became a building block in their quest for freedom. The breaking point. As the weeks rolled on, Marcus felt a growing bond with Zara, but he also sensed the weight of their situation becoming more burdensome. The fleeting moments they shared on the bus, the glances exchanged in the restaurant, and the quiet conversations were all precious, yet they were underscored by a dark tension that loomed over Zara's life. Every time they spoke, Marcus could see the flicker of hope in her eyes, but he also recognized the fear that held her captive. One afternoon, after a long day of school, Marcus took a detour to a local library, determined to gather more resources that could help him understand the dynamics of abuse and control. He knew he had to be prepared for whatever revelations Zara might share in their next encounter. As he browsed the shelves, the books seemed to leap out at him, each title promising insight into the issues that plagued his friend. With an armful of books on topics like emotional abuse, the effects of control on children, and ways to help, Marcus felt a sense of purpose. He wasn't just a bystander in Zara's life anymore. He was becoming an advocate, a voice for someone who felt voiceless. The library was quiet, and as he sat at a small table with his books spread out before him, He started to take notes. He absorbed every word, jotting down key phrases that might be helpful for Zara. Words of empowerment, resources for help, and stories of resilience from those who had escaped similar situations. It felt like he was preparing for a battle, one that could change Zora's life. After a few hours, he packed up his things and headed toward the bus stop. The air was cool and crisp, but his heart was warm with the knowledge he had gained. As he waited, his mind whirled with ideas of how to share this information with Zora. He hoped that, armed with knowledge, she might find the courage to seek help. When the bus finally arrived, Marcus boarded and took a seat near the back, scanning the rows for Zora. He felt a rush of anticipation and anxiety. Today, he hoped, would be the day they could take a significant step toward changing her life for the better. As the bus rolled through the familiar streets, he spotted her. Zora was already seated, her eyes glued to her phone, seemingly unaware of her surroundings. The sight tugged at his heartstrings. She looked so small, lost in a world that seemed intent on swallowing her whole. "Hey, Zara," he called out, trying to sound casual as he made his way to her seat. She looked up, surprise flashing across her face, quickly replaced by a hint of a smile. "Hi, Marcus. How was school today?" he asked, taking the seat next to her. "It was okay," she replied, but there was a shadow in her eyes that told him otherwise. Marcus decided it was time to gently probe deeper. "I found some books at the library about some things we talked about. I thought maybe we could look through them together." Zora's expression shifted slightly, intrigue mingling with apprehension. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice cautious. "About feeling trapped," he said softly, watching her closely. "I think it might help you to know you're not alone, that there are ways out." Her eyes widened, and he could see the gears turning in her mind. "What do you mean by that?" "Zara, I've been worried about you," he confessed. "I can see how much your father's control affects you. You deserve to have a life where you feel safe and happy, where you can make your own choices." She looked down, her fingers nervously tapping against the bus seat. "I don't know if I can do that," she whispered. "He gets angry if I talk back, or if I try to do anything he doesn't want." "Zara, it's not your fault," Marcus said, his voice steady. "You deserve to be treated with respect. If you're feeling unsafe, there are people who can help you. We can find them together." She bit her lip, clearly wrestling with her emotions. "I'm scared, Marcus. What if he finds out I told someone?" Marcus leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I promise, I'll help you figure this out. You don't have to face this alone. We can create a plan." Just then, the bus came to a sudden stop, jolting them both. Zara glanced out the window, and Marcus could see the flicker of worry cross her face. "He's going to be here soon," she said, anxiety creeping into her voice. "I need to go." As she made to stand, Marcus felt a sense of urgency swell within him. "Wait, just promise me you'll think about what I said. Please," he implored, desperation lacing his words. Zara nodded, a fleeting moment of connection passing between them. "Okay, I'll think about it. But I don't know how," she said, her voice trembling. "Just remember, I'm here for you. You can trust me," he replied, his heart heavy with concern. She stepped off the bus, casting one last glance back at him before disappearing into the crowd. Marcus felt a mix of hope and dread. He knew that the more Zara opened up, the more danger she could be in, but he also understood that their bond was growing stronger. She needed to feel empowered to take the next step. That evening, as Marcus walked home, he couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. He had seen the anger in Zora's father's eyes, and he knew he needed to act quickly. The thought of her feeling trapped or in danger gnawed at him, compelling him to take decisive action. The next day, he returned to the library, poring over more resources, gathering information on local shelters and hotlines that catered to children and families in crisis. He also researched ways to approach conversations about seeking help without triggering fear. Each book and article was a stepping stone toward empowering Zara, giving her the tools she needed to reclaim her voice. With a small stack of pamphlets and contact information in hand, he felt a sense of urgency building within him. He had to share this knowledge with Zara, but he also needed to ensure their conversations were discreet. He didn't want to draw her father's attention, especially now that he was becoming more aware of their interactions. As the day progressed, he felt a swell of determination. He would create a plan for Zara, a way for her to find a path to safety. That evening after work, he made his way to the park, hoping to find Zara alone. He took a seat on a bench, anxiously glancing around, waiting for her familiar figure to appear. After what felt like an eternity, he spotted her walking toward him, her father not in sight. Relief flooded through him as she approached. "Hey, Marcus," she greeted, her voice tentative. "Zara, I'm so glad you came," he said, motioning for her to sit beside him. "I wanted to talk more about what we discussed on the bus." She sat down, her posture still tense. "Okay," she said, her eyes wide with uncertainty. "I did some research," he said, pulling out the pamphlets he had gathered. "These are resources for kids who need help. There are people who can support you, who understand what you're going through." Zara's eyes widened as she looked over the materials. "You really think this could help?" "I do," Marcus replied earnestly. "But it has to come from you. You have to want to make a change. I can't do this for you, but I can be here every step of the way." Tears glistened in her eyes, and she took a deep breath. "I've thought about what you said. I don't want to keep living like this, but what if he finds out?" "Then we have to be smart about it," he said, his voice steady. "We can create a plan. Maybe a safe place where you can go if things get really bad. You need to have a backup plan." Zara nodded slowly, her expression shifting from fear to determination. "What do I need to do?" Marcus felt a swell of pride for her bravery. "First, let's start small. You can talk to a trusted teacher or counselor about how you're feeling. They can help you without involving your dad right away." "But what if they tell him?" she asked, worry etched on her face. "They can help you figure out the best way to talk about it. You don't have to go in unprepared. You can take your time," he reassured her. Zara nodded again, though uncertainty lingered in her eyes. "I'm just scared." "I know, but you've already taken a huge step by talking to me. You're stronger than you think," Marcus encouraged, reaching out to give her hand a gentle squeeze. The warmth of their connection sparked something within Zara. "Okay, I'll try. I'll talk to someone," she said, her voice firmer this time. As they sat in silence, Marcus felt a surge of hope. They were moving in the right direction, but he also knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. The next step would not be easy, especially with her father's controlling nature looming over them like a dark cloud. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the park, Zara's resolve began to blossom. She had been stuck in her father's suffocating grip for far too long, and with Marcus by her side, she felt a sense of empowerment she hadn't known before. But as they parted ways that evening, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling of impending danger. He sensed that Zara's father would not take kindly to her seeking help. If he were to find out, the consequences could be severe. Marcus decided he needed to be proactive. He reached out to the child advocacy group again, explaining the situation and asking for advice on how to navigate this delicate transition. They provided him with insight on how to help Zara, stressing the importance of a safety plan and discreet communication. Armed with new knowledge and a sense of urgency, Marcus resolved to continue being Zara's ally. He would help her find the courage to confront her father, and together they would navigate the treacherous path ahead. That night, as Marcus lay in bed, he made a promise to himself. He would stand by Zara no matter what. He would be her advocate, her friend, and her support as they forged a new path toward freedom and safety. In the days that followed, he maintained constant communication with Zara, ensuring she felt supported and empowered. Together, they began to build a plan, creating small steps she could take toward breaking free from her father's control. But as they drew closer to action, the tension grew. Marcus knew that the moment of truth was fast approaching, and with it came the realization that their lives were about to change forever. The final confrontation. The weeks turned into a blur of anticipation and anxiety as Marcus and Zara carefully navigated the complexities of her situation. Each day, they chipped away at the layers of fear that enveloped her, and as Zara gradually found her voice, the bond between them deepened. The support Marcus provided was invaluable, but as they drew closer to the point of no return, Marcus felt the weight of their choices pressing heavily on his shoulders. One chilly afternoon, Zara met Marcus at their usual spot in the park after school. The trees were bare, their branches swaying gently in the wind, a reflection of the changes occurring in their lives. As she approached, Marcus noticed a new fire in her eyes, a determination that hadn't been there before. "Hey, Marcus," she greeted, her voice steadier than it had been in weeks. "Hey, Zara, you seem different today," he said, noting the spark of resolve in her demeanor. "What's on your mind?" "I've been thinking a lot about what we talked about," she said, her brow furrowed slightly. "I want to talk to someone. I want to tell them what's going on." A surge of pride welled up in Marcus's chest. "That's amazing. Are you ready to go through with it?" "I think so," Zara replied, taking a deep breath. "I just need to figure out how to do it without my dad finding out." "Let's make a plan," Marcus said, his mind racing with possibilities. "We can go to the school counselor together. They're trained to help kids in situations like yours, and they can keep it confidential." Zara nodded, her determination shining through the uncertainty. "Okay, I'll do it." Marcus felt a rush of relief, but he also knew that the real challenge lay ahead. As they strategized, they discussed potential scenarios and what Zara might say. With every passing minute, the reality of their decision settled deeper into their hearts. As they walked back toward the school, the familiar sense of dread crept back in, mingling with their hopeful plans. What would happen if her father found out? Would he retaliate? The thought of what lay ahead weighed heavily on both of them. That evening, Zara went home, and as Marcus settled into his routine, he felt the anxiety bubbling beneath the surface. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the precipice of something significant, something that would change everything. The next morning, Marcus woke up early, his mind racing with thoughts of Zara and their impending meeting with the counselor. He had hardly slept, the images of her anxious face replaying over and over in his mind. After a quick breakfast, he made his way to school, arriving early so he could gather his thoughts and prepare for what lay ahead. When the bell rang, he met Zara outside the counselor's office, her expression a mixture of determination and trepidation. "I'm nervous," she admitted, fidgeting with her hands. "Me too," Marcus confessed, offering her a reassuring smile. "But remember, you're not alone in this. We'll get through it together." Zara nodded, and they stepped inside. The counselor, Mrs. Thompson, was a warm and welcoming presence. She greeted them with a smile, her demeanor immediately putting them at ease. "Hi, Zara." "Hi, Marcus. What brings you two here today?" Marcus felt Zara stiffen beside him, her hand brushing against his. He took a deep breath, encouraging her to speak. I wanted to talk about something important," Zara said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Thompson nodded, encouraging her with a gentle smile. "Of course, I'm here to listen." As Zara began to share her story, Marcus felt a swell of pride. The words tumbled out, fueled by the weeks of pent-up emotions and fear. She spoke of her father's anger, the way he controlled her life, and how it made her feel trapped. Mrs. Thompson listened intently, nodding along, her expression filled with compassion. "Zara, thank you for sharing this with me. It's incredibly brave of you to speak up about your feelings," she said, her voice soothing. "You're not alone, and there are resources available to help you." As Zara continued, Marcus felt a wave of hope wash over him. This was the moment they had been working toward, a chance for Zara to break free from the chains of her father's control. But just as the atmosphere felt lighter, the door to the office creaked open, and in walked Zora's father. The air immediately thickened with tension, and Marcus's heart raced as he registered the shift in the room. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. "Zora, what are you doing?" Panic coursed through Marcus. He glanced at Zora, whose eyes widened in fear. "Dad, she stammered, but her father cut her off, his gaze locked on Mrs. Thompson. "I thought I told you to keep my daughter away from these people," he snapped, the venom in his words sharp and pointed. Mrs. Thompson stood her ground, her voice firm but calm. "Mr. Johnson, Zora has the right to speak to a counselor about her feelings. This is a safe space for her." His eyes narrowed, and Marcus felt a chill settle over him. The man's presence was oppressive, and the tension in the room escalated. "You don't need to involve anyone else in this," he growled, his voice dripping with menace. "Zora is fine. She doesn't need help. I take care of her." "Dad, please," Zora pleaded, her voice shaking. "I need to talk about how I feel. I can't keep pretending everything is okay." "Enough," he shouted, his anger reverberating off the walls. "You will not talk to her anymore. Do you understand?" Marcus felt a surge of courage. "Sir, Zora deserves to express herself without fear of retribution. This isn't just about you. It's about her well-being," he interjected, his voice steady despite the storm brewing in front of him. Her father's gaze turned to Marcus, a dangerous glint in his eyes. "You think you can just swoop in and act like a hero. You have no idea what you're getting into." But Marcus stood firm. "You don't get to control her life like this. Zora is not just your daughter. She's a person with her own thoughts and feelings. Leave this office, both of you," he barked, the threat palpable in the air. "I won't have you filling her head with lies." Mrs. Thompson stepped forward, her voice unwavering. "Mr. Johnson, I must insist that you respect Zora's right to seek help. If you continue to threaten her, I will have no choice but to involve the authorities." The threat hung in the air, and Zora's father seemed to waver for a moment, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. But then he squared his jaw, refusing to back down. "You don't want to go down that road. I'll make sure you regret it." Marcus felt his heart race as Zora's father turned to leave, shooting a final glare at Marcus. "You think you can protect her? You don't know what I'm capable of," he warned, his tone low and menacing. As he stormed out, the weight of the moment settled over them like a dark cloud. Zora's expression was a mix of fear and anger, and Marcus could see the tears welling in her eyes. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "No, don't apologize," Marcus replied, feeling the surge of protectiveness. "You did nothing wrong. This was about you finding your voice." Mrs. Thompson moved to Zora's side, her demeanor gentle. "You were very brave, Zora. It's important to stand up for yourself, and you did just that. I will make sure you have the support you need." With her father gone, a sense of relief washed over Marcus, but it was quickly overshadowed by concern. The confrontation had exposed a dangerous side of Zora's father, and the reality of her situation became starkly clear. "Now that we've started this process, it's crucial to have a safety plan," Mrs. Thompson said, her voice serious. "Zora, I want you to know that there are safe spaces and people who can help you. You don't have to do this alone." Zora nodded, her resolve slowly returning as the weight of her father's control lifted slightly. "I want to do this," she said, her voice steadier. "I want to be free." As they mapped out a plan, Marcus felt hope blooming in his heart. They were taking steps toward freedom, toward reclaiming Zora's life. But he knew the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges. Zora's father would not take this lightly, and they would have to be prepared for whatever storm was coming their way. After the meeting, as they stepped out of the office, Marcus walked alongside Zora, feeling a mix of pride and anxiety. "You did amazing in there," he said, giving her a gentle nudge. "I'm really proud of you." "Thanks," Zora replied, a small smile breaking through the tension. "I couldn't have done it without you. Just remember, this is just the beginning," Marcus said, his tone serious. "We need to stay vigilant. Your father won't give up easily." Zara nodded, her expression shifting from hope to apprehension. "What if he tries to hurt you or me?" "We'll deal with it together," Marcus assured her. "I won't let anything happen to you." As they reached the bus stop, Marcus felt a renewed sense of determination. He wouldn't back down. They would face whatever came next, armed with knowledge, courage, and an unbreakable bond. In the days that followed, they continued to meet, planning their next steps and seeking support from Mrs. Thompson. As the reality of their situation unfolded, they both knew that the most challenging confrontation was still to come. But for the first time in a long while, Zara felt a glimmer of hope, a hope that she could carve out her own path and reclaim her life. With Marcus by her side, she felt stronger than ever. Together, they were ready to face the storm.